Hacknet tells a small story in a small interface, a terminal, a handful of commands, a dead man's inbox. But inside that narrow frame, the game builds a surprisingly coherent argument about power, secrecy, who gets to decide what the rest of us are allowed to know. The story is not really about hacking as a skill. It's about hacking as a moral position. The closest thing the game has to a thesis is that information wants to be free, and that the people who try to control that flow, whether for profit or for protection, tend to get burned by it. The game's central conceit is that its protagonist is narratively irrelevant. You are never given a name, a face, or a motive, beyond curiosity. What you inherit is a dead man's machine, a dead man's plan. Bit, an Australian hacker who helped build the eponymous Hacknet OS for the security firm EnTech, anticipated his own death, closely enough to leave behind a failsafe, a sequence of pre-written messages timed to activate 2 weeks after he's gone, guiding whoever finds his computer through exactly the steps he needs taken. This structure, a living player animating a dead man's intentions, does more than create narrative mystery. It removes agency from the player at the exact moment the game is handing them power. You're not choosing to expose EnTech's plan. You're being used, gently and posthumously, by someone who already made that choice for you. The game's second half only shifts this when Vapor, Bit's old friend and co-conspirator, steps in to complete the plan in person. Even then, the player is less a free agent than the last moving part in someone else's engineered outcome. Hacknet is a story about being handed a weapon and told implicitly to trust the hand that gave it to you. EnTech's plan is the game's sharpest piece of writing, because it isn't cartoonish. The company doesn't want to destroy the world or seize control of it, it wants to sell software. Having built Hacknet, an operating system capable of exposing security flaws in nearly anything. EnTech's leadership realizes the real money isn't in the tool itself, but in the fear it can manufacture. Release Hacknet into the wild. Let it demonstrate just how vulnerable ordinary systems are, and then sell the only product capable of stopping it. It's a protection racket dressed up as a cybersecurity firm, and it works because it mirrors something recognizably true about how security economies actually function. Vulnerability discovery, exploited or manufactured, often becomes the seed of a market. Bit's arc turns on his growing discomfort with this. He isn't a whistleblower in the conventional sense. He doesn't leak documents or go to the press. His answer to an unethical program is to try to delete it, to erase the tool before it can be released. That instinct, destroy the capability, rather than merely expose the wrongdoing, sets the tone for much of the game. Hacknet is less interested in accountability through disclosure than in accountability through unmaking, though as the ending complicates, that impulse doesn't fully win out. The game is careful not to make EnTech's CEO a mustache-twirling murderer. Bit's death is explicitly a mistake, a hitman contracted to intimidate him, not kill him, acting on incomplete instructions before the order can be walked back. This detail matters more than it first appears. It denies the player the comfort of a story where the bad guy is fully, deliberately evil. Instead, the violence in Hacknet emerges from bureaucratic sloppiness, the same kind of institutional carelessness that let a genuinely dangerous piece of software get built as a business strategy in the first place. The company isn't monstrous so much as recklessly indifferent to consequence, and that indifference is precisely what gets someone killed. This framing quietly reinforces the game's underlying argument. The danger was never really the hacking, it was the institution that treated both the software and the people building it as expendable, interchangeable pieces of a monetization scheme. The game's final act deserves particular attention for what it chooses not to do, and for what it doesn't quite finish doing either. Once the player and Vapor successfully breach EnTech's backup archive, they don't repurpose Hacknet or hand it off to some more trustworthy authority. They delete it. The production server, the backup archive, even the port hack server at Bit's own instruction. But the erasure isn't total. In his final message, Bit tells the player that they now hold the only remaining copy of Hacknet. The tool survives the ending. It just survives in the hands of one anonymous, unvetted person instead of a corporation. That's a stranger, less tidy resolution than pure self-erasure would have been, and arguably more unsettling. Most hacking fiction ends with the protagonist keeping their power outright, or trading it for a bigger score, or ascending into some new criminal or heroic status. Hacknet doesn't quite let the player keep it clean, but it doesn't take away the power away either. It just narrows who's allowed to have it to a single, silent, undefined person. The game seems less interested in the fantasy of total unmaking than in a quieter, more uncomfortable question. Is one anonymous person with total access to Hacknet actually any safer than a corporation was? It's a story that never fully resolves its own protagonist's right to keep what they've inherited, which is an unusually self-critical move for a genre that typically treats hacking mastery as an unambiguous reward. Hacknet never overreaches. It doesn't try to build a sprawling mythology or position itself as a grand statement on surveillance capitalism, even though its plot gestures in that direction. What it does instead is stay disciplined. One dead hacker, one grieving friend, one company that made a bad bet on fear as a business model, and one anonymous player caught in the middle, left holding a tool they never asked for and by the end still haven't fully let go of. By keeping its cast small and its stakes personal, a friendship, a betrayal, a death that shouldn't have happened, the game earns an ending that a louder, more maximalist hacking story couldn't. The quiet, slightly uneasy weight of being the last person standing with something dangerous in your hands. If this one resonated, subscribe. New essays drop weekly, and you never know what's coming next. Share it with someone who'd get it, and leave a comment. I want to know which door this opened for you. Mystery Compendium, the archive is always open.